Welcome to the Aconic Podcast with me, Soon Yu, your host. The Aconic Podcast features candid conversations with successful Asian and AAPI leaders who share their personal journeys of challenges and triumphs. The Aconic Podcast is brought to you by the Asian American Foundation, by Gold House, and by the founders of the Asian Alumni Chapter of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and is made possible through the generous support of Allstars Ventures, whose offices also serve as the home of the Aconic Podcast.
I thought I was doing all the things that I was supposed to do, going back to duty and guilt and all of those things. And I was the most unhappy I've ever been in my life.
In today's episode, we are joined by Paraag Marathe, president of the San Francisco 49ers, who's tapping into the power of vulnerability to overcome the stigma of mental health, especially in a male-dominated industry filled with bravado. I'm super excited to welcome my next guest to the Aconic Podcast. I'm a big 49ers fan, and obviously this is somebody you may not know because he's not maybe in all the headlines, but trust me, he has been a key architect for over a quarter century for the 49ers. Please welcome to the podcast, Paraag Marathe. How are you doing today, Paraag?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, and so I want our listeners to understand how amazing of a background you have. I know that spending 5 years in an organization, you tend to develop new capabilities, you have new roles. You've been with one organization for almost a quarter of a century. That's truly amazing. And you've had different roles in there. I think you've actually started off helping develop the analytics department. And then from there, you've taken charge of creating the whole Levi's vision and making it come true. And now you're in charge of more than just the football operations. You're actually in charge with some of the new enterprises and franchises globally. And I think that's really exciting. We'll get into all of that. I think the one thing that I thought was really interesting is how Billy Beane, for those of you guys who don't know who Billy Beane is, there is a whole movie about Billy Beane called Moneyball, right? And it's played by Brad Pitt. And I think Billy, when asked about you, said a lot of complimentary things. But the one thing he did say that was really salient was this idea that when I met Paraag, I knew that I wanted to hire him instantly. However, as I got to know him, I realized I'd probably be working for him. So I think that is an incredible testament from one of the masterminds when it comes to sports analytics and building sports franchises. So with that background, Paraag, welcome to the show. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the 49ers, because I don't think people realize how many different roles you've played and what you're doing today.
I still wear a few different hats within the 49ers as well as within 49ers Enterprises, which is sort of our umbrella organization for everything that we do within the sports entertainment space. But within the 49ers, I do what I've done since the first day I got here, which is be involved in helping to run football operations. I got a chance in 2001 when Bill Walsh and Dr. John York gave me an opportunity to come in as an intern on a trial basis. And that job was around doing contract research, negotiations research, looking at how to better structure or at least understand our salary cap and looking at how to predict player performance. And so I sort of have always been involved in football operations. Obviously, there's a few pit stops in there. For 7-8 years, I was president and COO of the 49ers as we were doing Levi's Stadium. But I've always had my football job, and I still do my football job because it's just what I love to do. So I negotiate all our player contracts. I manage our cap. I work with Coach Shanahan and John Lynch on all major decisions that we have. It's sort of the part of my job that is a hobby, I guess you could say. It's my version of competing. I just, I live for winning. I hate losing, but I love the competition. And so that's the part I really enjoy. About 7-8 years ago, we started 49ers Enterprises. And it was really because we were sitting on this great bench of people who had diverse backgrounds and interest in more than just the NFL. So we had this great executive team. We're here in Silicon Valley, which is the intellectual capital of the world. So we've got this kind of innovation mindset. We have one of the biggest sports brands in the world, arguably. And so, here we are at the nexus of all of that. Let's take advantage of it beyond just an NFL football team. And so that's where we've dabbled in lots of things. We've incubated and built our own companies, sports and entertainment related companies. We have formed our own venture arm of the team where we made a number of different investments in young companies. We've done consulting for different sports properties and leagues, and we've invested in different sports properties. And so Leeds United is an example where we put together an investment group, raised a bunch of money, and playing our hand in the other football as well.
That's sort of the foundational piece that has sort of let you cultivate the talent, build those capabilities. Mm-hmm. But the mindset to say, how do we scale this? And how do we actually, where we scale, add new innovation, new branding, new thinking, new talent? Wow, that is truly forward thinking, and it's truly amazing. The Aconic Podcast is all focused on the idea of the hero's journey. It's really the idea that, we all start off with certain aspirations, and at some point we get there. But it's the journey of getting there, the challenges that we overcome, the obstacles we face, the times we fell on our face. And when I was looking at your background, at first pass, I wouldn't have thought you were the epitome of the hero's journey, but you really are. I mean, you actually began early on in your, I think, childhood with a stated goal of wanting to run a sports franchise. I don't know if that was in college or if that was in high school, but you actually wrote that in an application for either high school or college, which just truly blows my mind. Mm-hmm. And in the process of getting there, you've had to overcome obstacles of being a nerd in a jock environment, trying to introduce art with science, and really breaking down stereotypes of male-dominated sports, or even part of the Asian community having certain stereotypes. And really, that journey of growth, I think, has made you come out probably different than what you anticipated you were. You're probably softer with analytics. You're probably celebrating your imperfection as much as your perfection. And, you've actually become quite a vocal person in many communities, but not for the reasons you would think, for reasons that are your personal passions and things you care about. And I just think that journey has led to, overcoming those obstacles has led you sort of to different vistas and just different creations of yourself. And so go way back and say, at one point, you were probably not even making minimum wage. And I imagine you were either putting pepperoni on like mozzarella cheese and, basically serving up pizza. Can you describe your first sort of job?
Yeah. So my dad, I had the typical Asian American upbringing, or at least Indian American upbringing, where my dad was an engineer. He, went to IIT in India, came out here in the 60s for his PhD in engineering and computer science, and started working at, I think it was like Wang Labs and then HP.
Oh, yeah.
And my mom was a homemaker. But we had the American dream of wanting to own a business. And I was 9, 10, and my sister was 12, 13. And when we decided, there was a family vote. It was either going to be a pizza restaurant, buy a pizza restaurant, buy a gas station, or buy a party store, like one of those Hallmark stores or like a Party City store. And for some reason, my dad made it a Democratic vote. And so my mom was for the party store, my dad was for the gas station, and my sister and I for the pizza restaurant. And so 2-1-1. And so we bought a round table pizza. And my dad fancied the idea of being able to do both for a little bit. So for a year, he was working at HP and doing nights at the restaurant at Round Table. And I remember I was starting 6th grade when it just became not tenable anymore. Just because they didn't trust the managers and the labor, and they just felt like it was too labor intensive. So my dad quit to focus on the pizza restaurant. And probably not what he had envisioned when we was thinking about owning a business. So I say all this because it started my career. My first job started from guilt because I created the vote, the deciding vote that led to the pizza restaurant. So I started working there in 6th grade, actually between 5th and 6th grade, and started managing the restaurant starting in 7th grade. So I was, 12 years old, putting a schedule together for 18 to 25-year-olds of what their shifts were going to be and which delivery drivers need to work on Friday and Saturday and all of that. I honestly spent easily more of my awake hours at Round Table Pizza, at my parents' Round Table, than I did at my house. My adolescent memories are from the different experiences there, not just working there, but, just in and around the Round Table. Because I ended up also hiring a lot of my friends and things like that. And it was just sort of a way of life. It didn't really feel like a choice for me. It started as guilt. My rule with my parents, with me working there so much, my rule was that when I was there, you guys had to go home. Not because I didn't want to be around them, but because of that guilt. And I just want them to at least have their evenings together. And so because I could manage the restaurant and they don't need to be there also. And so that was my rule. And so, it kind of became Round Table and pizza became my mom, became my dad, became my friends, became my family. It just became everything about what my childhood was.
Wow, that's amazing. And the fact that you can actually look back at it and think one of the key motivators was this idea of guilt. And growing up in an Asian family, I felt the guilt of not maybe living up to expectations or being judged. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of our listeners could probably relate to the idea of guilt, whether it's the motivator or it's the unwanted poke from behind to make us do what we're doing. That's really powerful. I'm curious, were those formative years in terms of how you sort of attacked your first job? Did you learn some lessons there that you've applied?
Most of the lessons I learned in leadership and accountability, grit, effort, all of those things came from Round Table. I probably learned more about myself and how to motivate myself and others working that pizza restaurant every day than I did in college or grad school or early even in my professional career. I just learned it from an early age, right? And it wasn't just guilt, it was duty too, just like feeling that the duty to the family. And so, and I guess I would add one more thing is learning to persevere when everyone counts you out. Here when I started at the Niners, when I started the NFL, there just weren't people that looked like me, right? The NFL is very much a white and black industry, and it's really about who you know, not what you know, that at least what gets you in the door. And when I started at the Niners, I knew nobody. And I just, through a fortuitous turn of events, I was given a chance and I got my start, but I didn't know anybody. And so I was always sort of counted out as somebody who, with a pocket protector who worked in a windowless office that cranking out analytics. Same thing at Round Table. I was counted out because I was the kid. I was less than a kid. I was a 12-year-old, right? Managing people who were working there full time as their career to take care of their families. I was also seen as the owner's kid, right? And so I had two things where people just discounted me. I was a novelty to customers because they saw this little boy who couldn't see over the cash register taking orders, having to stand to the side of the register to take the order because I was only 5'2" or whatever I was. And so I learned from an early age also to just tune out the noise and to just focus on, whatever I thought was right and to persevere.
I think that theme of overcoming adversity is a big part of, I think, your journey. And when I was looking at it, and you mentioned getting that early break to join the Niners. I think prior to that, you were working at Bain. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we both share that. I worked there as an associate consultant for a little while too. I think you had a much more storied career, and I think you probably got to work on some of the funner projects, especially around sports franchises and whatnot. And so explain how you got a call and what was it all about to say, Paraag, I think we could actually utilize what you've been doing to help the 49ers.
Yeah. So I played sports my whole life. I played baseball and soccer competitively through high school. I've always loved competition and team sports. And so when I got to college, and I fancied the idea of trying out for the baseball team at Cal. I was a pitcher. It didn't really pan out like I wanted it to, although I attempted. But I always just loved it. I watched Jerry Maguire, the movie with Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr., And suddenly it was an epiphany for me, because I realized there's this whole other side of the business that you don't need to just be a player to be a part of sports. You could be a coach, you could be an agent, you could be a general manager. There's all these other elements to it. It was early in my sophomore year of college at Berkeley. And so back then, I sent resumes and cover letters to every sports agencies. I first thought I wanted to be an agent. I sent resumes and cover letters to everyone that I could find an address for. Probably 70, 80 different ones. And only one responded to me. It was IMG, not their athlete representation, but their corporate representation. So when they were helping Cadillac on their sports marketing initiatives, or American Express, things like that. So for 3 school years and 2 summers in college, I interned. I got a stipend that didn't cover my BART fare from Berkeley to San Francisco. But it was my first taste of working in sports. And I tell this story because once I graduated, sports is a very polarized world compensation-wise. You either get paid nothing like I was, or you get paid very well, and not a whole lot in between. So I thought, okay, I've been losing money for 3 years. It's maybe time for me to earn some money, which is why I went to work for Bain & Company, a management consulting firm, to at least get a paycheck, a real paycheck. But because of my IMG sports experience that I did for 2.5 years when I was at Cal, I became the sports guy. Even though Bain is not necessarily known as a sports consulting firm, anytime Bain had any sports related client, I was the natural guy to put on the team. And so Nike was a big Bain client for a while. Mm-hmm. So I got to work on a lot of different Nike projects for Bain on behalf of Nike. And then just by a fortuitous turn of events, Bill Walsh, who was retiring as the general manager of the 49ers, called up Bain because he knew he had a common friend at Bain, a partner, and said he wants to do a project on the 2001 draft, not evaluating the players, but evaluating the picks, the currency value of each pick in the draft when you make trades, so like the exchange rate, what a pick is worth. So he hired Bain on almost like a pro bono type case for 3 months. Again, I was the sports guy. I had all my IMG experience, and I had all my Nike experience. And a key thing is that it was a pro bono type case. So that meant that none of the partners who were making real money would devote any real time to it, because it was kind of just a freebie. So Bain could promote the Niners were a client. So what that meant is this 23-year-old kid who was put on the project got to be front and center and not just do all the work, but be the client-facing guy, because nobody else wanted to devote any time to it, because it was an opportunity cost, lost revenue for them if they focused on this versus something else. And so for 3 months, I lived here at the 49er facility working on that project, going up and through the draft. And keep in mind, I grew up a stone's throw from the 49ers facility, and I grew up, loving everything about sports. It was just my dream come true. And so after I finished, when the project finished and they asked me to come and work full time, first on like a trial basis, that's why I called it an externship. I first just took a leave from Bain for 6 months, and then that 6 months became forever.
That's fantastic. A couple of things really stand out. You wrote 60 to 70 letters. I mean, just to write one letter and to put that together and to ship it off, and then the level of rejection, or I guess no response probably, right?
Yeah.
But that in and of itself, the perseverance of being able to send out 69 letters that never got returned is pretty amazing. I think the other part is you talk about there were some incredibly great conditions for you to actually excel, but a lot of that was predicated on the fact that you spent so much time of your own willingness and sacrifice and not being paid to get good at something you were passionate about. Mm-hmm. That kind of laid the groundwork for good fortune to happen. If you had never done that, it wouldn't have mattered. If all those other things have happened, you wouldn't have been the guy picked, and you wouldn't have been able probably to even help. So I think it's kind of a combination of both. And I really love this idea that you paid it forward for yourself, right? And you did this IMG stuff while you were at school full time at Berkeley, right? Berkeley's not a cakewalk, right?
Yeah.
Paraag?
Yeah.
And what were you studying actually at Berkeley? I'm curious.
I studied business.
Oh, you were studying business. Yeah. Okay, well, and again, not a cakewalk. That's really fantastic. So you got this chance. Mm-hmm. You enter the 49ers, and I kind of would describe this as the jocks versus a nerd. Not even, well, maybe when you brought in your team, we could add the plural nerds, right? But it was really this idea, jocks versus nerds. And I'm sure you met up with incredible resistance. Talk about that and how you overcame that.
Honestly, it was probably, I don't know, trial and error is the right word, but I'll say it wasn't without taking a lot of body shots, meaning it was hurtful at times because some of the disdain for me was pretty obvious and transparent across the league, just because like I didn't look like everybody else. I was probably a threat to a lot of people. And same thing, like when I started as a kid here, I was because Coach Walsh and Terry Donahue and John York gave me a chance. So they were all looking at me with everyone here was looking at me with side eyes, like, who is this kid? And at that time it was talk radio. It wasn't so much social media, but it was talk radio. And I remember, I learned from an early age, I'd never listened to talk radio, but that doesn't stop my mom from it or my family. And they would call me in the evening like, hey, are you okay? What do you mean, Mom? They're like, oh, they're saying this and this and that about you. And, I can't say sometimes some of those daggers didn't land. And so you slowly develop a callus where you realize, let me just focus on what I think I'm doing the right thing and making a difference and trying to make this organization better and try to help us win. And then everything else is just noise. But that didn't come without trial and error. There were a lot of body blows along the way where there's a lot of times where I just kind of wanted to quit because it wasn't worth the criticism. And maybe I thought that other industries were more of a meritocracy than this one was, where I would just be measured on the merits of whatever I was able to accomplish or not. And it just didn't feel fair here. So there was a lot of moments where I almost quit.
Are you ready to be part of a community that amplifies the voices of Asian leaders in business, government, and the arts? The founders of this podcast are members of the Asian Alumni Chapter of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, whose mission is to empower Asian and AAPI voices in our community. By subscribing to this podcast, you'll stay up to date on the latest Aconic episodes, and importantly, gain exclusive invitations to select Stanford Asian alumni events that can provide useful insights and a powerful network to help you on your personal and professional journeys. Go to AconicPodcast.com and subscribe today. Join us and be a part of a community that's shaping the future of Asian leadership. There's an analogy back to your pizza days where you were the youngest person working in the shift and you had a sense of entitlement because you were the kid of the parent of the owners, right? Yeah. And kind of analogous to being in the 49ers where you were kind of this young kid brought in, right? Mm-hmm. And you had the ear of Bill Walsh and maybe the Yorks and some other folks, but everybody else is like, I have to listen to this guy, right? And I remember you even said something in one of the articles where this is a situation where actually having a Stanford MBA was a negative, not a positive, right? So you had all these things going against you, and yet you were able to sort of persevere through that. And I think the other thing I really took from that is this idea, the first time you receive criticism, especially if it's public, especially if people you love and care about hear about it, right? You can say, oh, I'm going to let it roll off my shoulder, I'm going to be thick-skinned. That's not reality. Reality is there are words, there are phrases, there are things that have been said that you still wake up thinking about, or you go to bed thinking about, and you go to bed thinking that was either really unfair or, God damn it, they're right, and I've got to fix that, and I don't want anyone to know that I was wrong, right? But you had both of those, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's easy for people to say, they completely tuned it out and just focus, but it hurts when you're doubted and discounted and discarded. But as long as you can stay true to your own personal North Star, that star is always going to be there. You just got to look up for it.
And I love that because your star was set early on when you even wrote in your college applications, I want to run a sports franchise. So that's always been kind of a North Star for you, and you're doing it right now. I'm curious though, I was looking at your trajectory, and I'm inferring here because you never said this, but my sense is you came in pretty strong with analytics. By now, from everything I'm reading, is that you're incredibly good with the soft skills, the diplomacy, the working with other people, the managing multiple stakeholders. Did that come from the School of Hard Knocks? Did that also come from listening to criticism and reflecting on and saying, hey, I'm going to actually prototype something else and try something new or learn new skills? Or was that something that just through grit that people finally saw that it was already inherent in you?
I think it's just recognizing, what's best for the organization, what's best for the team, what's the produces the best chance to to find the right player or to win a game, it's a combination of everything. There's no one clear defined path or answer. There's just covariance. Everything is impacting everything else, right? And first and foremost is, how do you have a cohesive team where the sum of the parts are greater than the individual pieces, right? And how do you get the most out of people? It's empowering them. It's holding them accountable, giving people the space to feel comfortable, calling out, saying their opinions. Let the best idea win. It doesn't matter what level of a person the idea comes from or what the idea is rooted in. It's just like, let the best idea wins always. It should be an empirical thing. And so that's something that I've always taken with me wherever I've been. Maybe because it was also like, back to my roundtable days when I was 12 years old studying this, it was just, okay, I was the youngest, but, I was the one probably most passionate about it because it was my family's livelihood. And if I didn't run it well, I maybe wasn't getting the money that we needed to put me through college, for example, right? And so you're just wherever level and however it comes from, the best idea wins. And that's something that, as we were going about putting together a team to build Levi Stadium, as we're going about doing what we're doing with Leeds United right now, it's something that I really hold tried and true about just trying to build the teams where everybody feels empowered and everybody feels like if they have a voice and if they have the best answer, it's going to be heard.
Having that clear North Star and having that as the primary motivator, and then allowing, therefore, your ego to say, I'm not always going to have the best ideas, and I'm going to welcome other people's ideas, even if it makes my idea look less, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a powerful takeaway for me from what you said. I was also struck by this idea when you were talking about building the right teams. There's this old saying about, do you want to have an all-star team or a team of all-stars, right? And ideally, you have a team of all-stars that then becomes an all-star team. Mm-hmm. What's the path in doing that?
Finding the right mix is really important. And I'll give an example of just something that came up the other day. Is I speak with a lot of conviction. And when I'm passionate about something, I tend to get louder and try to be more persuasive and convincing. And sometimes folks might be a little too deferential to that because, I'm speaking so passionately, I'm getting louder in my voice and everything. But that's just because I'm passionate about it. But I actually want to hear someone else's point of view, mm-hmm. and I can be turned. I'm not so stubborn so that just because I'm speaking passionately about something that my mind can't be changed. I bring that example up because it's good to find the mix of people that will challenge that won't be afraid of that maybe some people that would be differential but find a different backdoor into changing. It's important to bring kind of that mix into the group. Another example is it's good to have both familiar and unfamiliar faces in a team. So when we took over 100% control of Leeds and I became chairman of Leeds, obviously it's across the pond. It's on the other side of the world. I try to go there often, but clearly I'm not there every day. I'm not there every week. And so how do I manage that executive team? One of the things that I did was that 3 folks who I had hired as executives at the 49ers 10 to 15 years ago, one who did a lot of our stadium financing for Levi's, one who was my head of strategic planning at the 49ers, just to use those 2 as an example. And then after we opened the stadium, they had since gone off. One worked directly for Elon at Tesla. Another worked as a CFO of a biotech company that went IPO. And so we'd stayed friends, but they were out of the sports game. And when we took over Leeds, I called them up and I said, hey, how would you like to bring the band back together? And I'd love, one of you to go be the COO, the other one to go be the chief strategy officer and CFO to go help build everything that kind of what we did at the 49ers and building the 49ers from what they were to what we've become and doing the same in Leeds. I need you to move. Since I'm not moving, I need you to move to Leeds. But I'm going to put you as part of the equity structure of this, and I'm going to bring you into this. And so we brought the band back together, and those 2 folks, they moved their young families. They live in Leeds now. And now we have a nice mix of people who used to work for me at the Niners. And so they know what it's supposed to look like. They know what I want it to look like in terms of the culture of accountability and empathy and having fun, as well as the folks who have been there. And so it's just getting a nice, diverse mix of skills, talents, personalities, familiarity, all of those things.
Wow. So you have basically pulled together an all-star team. That's a team of all-stars, right? Because
Right.
there are people, they've done great in other roles when they left the 49ers. And so they proved themselves to be all-stars, but you brought them together and they function as a team. And I think a couple of the ingredients that you brought up that I think are really important is this idea that, one, diversity. Not everyone's like all-star at the exact same role, right? And that sort of helps. And I think appreciating the diversity. And it's probably not just role diversity, it's thinking diversity, it's personality diversity. Yeah. It's all different ranges of diversity. And the other thing you mentioned is this idea of having a shared value system and culture, right? Mm-hmm. And those two, if you can have those two components, I think you can take that team of all-stars and turn that into an all-star team. Thinking specifically, shifting gears a little bit, but about the Asian community.
Yeah.
And we're really good at being team players, right? And you understand the term team players. So there's sort of two levels here. There's the idea of being, the Asian community, you're kind of taught to keep your head below kind of the fray and seek harmony. All those things that you're taught early on makes you a really good team player, but it doesn't necessarily allow you to stand out and doesn't allow you to always be an all-star. On top of that, whether it's Asian or not, there's this idea of introverts versus extroverts. And, how do we also make sure that it's great to have a boss like you that can appreciate it. Introverts, you probably purposely hire them and you probably know how to bring them out, but that's not always going to be the case. So how do both as Asian community and as introverts, can we actually not just be team players, but also be part of an all-star team by being an all-star ourselves?
Yeah, I think there's self-confidence, self-efficacy, the ability to self-recognize, like, what is it that you're passionate about? I think a lot of us, I say us Asian Americans and first or second generation, we're sort of typecast into certain roles and careers. Like, I know for me, it was be an engineer, be a doctor, be a lawyer, and kind of there's nothing else. For the first decade or 15 years of my career, my family in India thought I was just doing a hobby, and they were like, when is Paraag going to go get a real job? Because it was not common. And so I think the first thing is, hey, go do what it is that you love to do. Something where you wake up in the morning, you're excited to go attack the day. You're excited to go. It doesn't feel like work if you're loving what you're doing, right? I think maybe one of the first problems is we all are conditioned to just be down a certain path. I mean, I was almost on that. I applied to one college because my dad went to Berkeley. I applied to Berkeley. I just thought that's what I was supposed to do. I didn't even give myself a moment of freedom to think about what else might I like to do. Same thing with business school. Like, I almost didn't go to business school because I had found my Niners job, but I'd already started applying to business schools. And I hadn't even thought about whether it was what I wanted to do. It was just what I was supposed to do. And I'd never even given myself a moment to think, is that really what I enjoy doing? Now, like I said, I keep using good fortune for me because it was, but like, I only happened to, be given the chance to do what I love, and it doesn't feel like work. So I think the first thing is imploring young people to just go figuring out what it is that you love, because like that, part of when we all talk about what our superpower is, but like, you can't truly unleash your superpower unless you're actually in a space where it's something you love doing. Within that, I think it's just being okay with failure, being okay with stepping out, being okay with leading. We all are told to not make any waves and not upset the apple cart and just, stay in your lane. That's sort of the Indian way. That's sort of the Asian way. And it's a very cultural, it's a multi-generational, hundreds of years of cultural training that gets you there. But, our parents or our parents' parents brought us here in search, seeking that new way, that new life of being able to find your own. Like my dad, buying that round table pizza, what he did, because he'd done the engineer thing and he'd done his whole path. But you know what? He wanted to own his own business, even if it cost him his career, his engineering career. He wanted to own his own business. And he probably made a third, if not less than what he was making his engineering career, but he was probably proud of the fact that he owned his own business. And so, I don't know, just being able to step out, having the confidence to step out of that mold.
Real important learnings that you're sharing here. One is this idea, it's not just about superpower, it's actually the intersection of superpower with super passion, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have, you have superpower, but it's not related or you're not using it for anything you're passionate about, it's easy to not stand out. It's easy not to take a risk because you have nothing at stake. You don't care, right? So I do think this idea of finding your super passion, we could probably do a whole podcast just on the idea of how do you find your super passion, I think is so critical. And then this idea of let that passion for whatever it is you have give you the motivation to take a couple of risks, to be uncomfortable, to try, to stretch, and to learn new things. I think that and to have faith that passion will keep you on track or pick you up when you fall down. I just think that's incredibly powerful. I think it's also important for folks to know that you have a pretty healthy comfort with the idea of being imperfect. But that was a journey to get you there. I have a feeling that you're probably the smartest kid in the room early on, right? The hardest working or smartest. And then at some point, I think you've come to the realization that it's not always about that. In fact, what makes us unique is this idea that the things that either we're passionate about or we're not very good at or we're imperfect. And I think you had a really awakening, and a lot of it had to do, I think, with that hard chapter of just what you went through with your sister. And I don't know if our audience or is very familiar with that. But can you take us through that journey and how you came to this idea of embracing invulnerability and imperfection?
Certainly. So I think when you set your document before around like some hard times that you faced in your career, I think you called it rock bottom, and how would you describe how you came through that? For me, it's kind of ironic. My rock bottom was probably a period of about 4 years. And the irony is that it was the period that was probably the fastest track for me on my career trajectory. It was when I was promoted to president of the team. It was when we were opening the grand opening for Levi Stadium and hosting Super Bowl 50. That was actually my rock bottom in both personal and professional, even though everything was ascending perceptually in my career. And that was in 2011. My sister, after battling with depression and eating disorders, had anorexia, had passed away in 2011 after dealing with it for about 9 years in a pretty significant way. And, being from Indian culture where there's no such thing as mental illness, in Indian culture, it's certainly not anorexia. It's just more, it's eat or don't eat. There is no, what do you mean? There's this perception about food, and it's pretty simple. And we didn't believe in therapy. There's no space for mental illness in the high achieving world of that Asian Americans have been in. And so we just compartmentalized. And I remember it was something that I just tried to compartmentalize and put it in the back of my mind. During that time, like I said, I was being promoted. We were going through we were building, I was hiring a bunch of people. We were building the team that would eventually help us build Levi Stadium, and great success in my perceived success in my professional career. But I was just dealing with the demons, just like I was trying my hardest to compartmentalize and block it out of my mind and not think that it was impacting me. I ended up, I was in a relationship at the time that had already kind of gone to more of a friendship. I just felt like I needed to check the boxes that I needed to check because it was important for my career. So I got married when I shouldn't have gotten married at that time. And because again, it was just important for me to be seen with a wife and all of those things. And this was I'm also, it was my ex-wife was Indian, providing my parents with a surrogate daughter that they had lost. And so I thought I was doing all the things that I was supposed to do, going back to duty and guilt and all of those things. And I was the most unhappy I've ever been in my life. And the epiphany that I had and the realization that I had and how I got out of the rock bottom is something that is why I'm so open about talking about this, to pay it forward, to help all young people out there. And that was a recognition that my career is simply and only what I do. It is not who I am. It is just what pays the bills. And yeah, it's awesome to love it and to be passionate about it, but it's just what I do, not who I am. And who I am is defined by who I love, who loves me, who I want to spend time with, who wants to spend time with me, my friends. That's what matters, because we all come into the world the same way and we all leave the world the same way. And it took me 4 or 5 years to kind of come to that realization. I had I had an amicable divorce, and I ended up marrying the love of my life, the person that I was with and wanted to be with since we were 18 years old in college. And ironically, she's Asian American, she's Chinese. And so our kids are both Indian and Chinese. But it's that realization, that epiphany I had, is probably the most freeing thing for me, actually, in my career. And it's because I'm okay jumping out of a plane without a parachute, because it's not the end of the world, because I don't die in a professional sense, because it's just what I do. And so that is so empowering to know that, hey, I'm going to go try this and I'm going to go try that. We're going to go forward 49ers Enterprises. I'm going to go try to buy a European football club. I'm going to go try to get involved in bringing cricket to the U.S. I'm going to go try to start this company, all those things. Because if I fail, hey, it's okay. I still go to bed at night. I still have my kids wake me up first thing in the morning and want me to take them rollerblading, and that's what matters. And it's that empowering feeling that I feel like has really unlocked not just my life, but my career too. I was just so focused on following the steps that I needed to for success, respect, money, recognition, all of these superficial things that don't define me. And so it was realizing that I don't need those was the most empowering thing in the world.
That is so powerful, Paraag. I mean, if there's just one piece of advice to take away from this entire talk, would be that. It's the idea of what we do does not define who we are. And who we are is really this idea of love, right? Like where we celebrate love, what we love, and how we bring love, together. And I think it's incredibly powerful. And I think you're right. We spend a lot of our life being conditioned to believe that love will only come by checking off the boxes, right? By following the straight and steady path through achievement, through accomplishment, through recognition. And it takes us, I don't know, most of our life to figure out that we were totally wrong, right?
We don't chase love with the same vigor that we chase our careers or our academics. And it's just too bad. And that's probably something that is much more endemic within the Asian American community than not. And, so you end up taking for granted your kids, your parents, your spouse, your brothers, your sisters, because they're just there. And you don't attack that with as much vigor as you do achieving your next career milestone. And that career milestone means nothing in the grand scope of things.
And, a lot of what you're saying to me also is one of the reasons we actually started the podcast, is because of this idea of just looking at taboos and saying they have been limiting us. They have been hurting our community and hurting ourselves. And, whether it be a taboo on mental illness, a taboo on failing or being imperfect, or a taboo on being vulnerable or being, for you, it's interesting. You're in a very machismo type industry that's male dominated. And at the same time, you're talking about love. It just is like, would we anticipate that when, somebody tuned in and say, the guy who's leading up the 49ers, is he going to be talking about love? Yes, he is. Let's go back to the idea of taboo, because I think it's really important. I do think for our listeners, this idea of mental health and the idea that, and people think, people have choices. And when it comes to mental health, that's not always the case. Can you kind of explain your journey in terms of what you've learned about mental health and how can we deal with it better?
One of the most important things to me is empathy. We always think we have an idea of what someone else is thinking and what they should be thinking, how you're thinking, because it's so easy because you know what you're thinking. But, to truly try to spend a day in another man or another woman's shoes and actually understand what they're struggling with, that's real empathy. And I think that is something that is just kind of lost when it comes to mental illness and different, mental illnesses. It's something that we all, especially in our Asian American communities, it's a taboo subject. It's not something, it's people, my family, we're the number one culprits of it. We were embarrassed of my sister. And we would, let me just speak for myself, not even speaking for my parents. I would excuse it away as saying, oh, I would just get mad at the way other people were looking at her because she was so emaciated. And so I was mad when that wasn't the case. That was my mask. The truth was I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed of how she reflected on me because I was walking around with a sister who was under 50 pounds. And like that was because it's just, we all about, putting our face on for our friends and family because you never want to show weakness, right? So I think the first is just having the empathy and actually understanding the struggle that someone's feeling and that their life is a combination of everything that they've dealt with in their life up to that point. And nobody has done all of those things other than them. So you can't go and ascribe whatever your feelings are to that person because, they are unique to themselves. And so for me, I didn't learn a lot of it. I was culprit number one on a lot of these things that I talk about around helping someone and never giving up and being there for them and having empathy. All of those things, I was the worst at all of those things with my sister. And actually, I didn't even start speaking up about my feelings on this for 4 or 5 years after she passed, before I even felt comfortable talking about weakness, for example. But, there's a lot of people out there that just are yearning for help from a loved one and someone who loves them, but they just don't know how. And so that's the reason why I'm so vocal about it. And you mentioned, in the machismo industry, that's precisely the reason why I do it as much as I can, because I'm in a sports, which is the machismo industry, in a male-dominated industry. I'm a minority. And so I'm all of the things where you wouldn't necessarily be talking about mental illness, right? And so I figured if I, of all people, is someone who talks about it, like maybe more people will listen. And if only one listens from it, and I've helped somebody, whether it be somebody who's struggling with something or somebody's sibling, brother, mother, father, son or daughter, then it's worth it. It makes a difference.
In today's episode, we discuss the serious topic of eating disorders. One organization that is helping families deal with that is Project Heal, whose mission is to break down the barriers that prevent healing from eating disorders. Paraag is very active on the board, and I'm sure he'd appreciate your support. To learn more, please visit theprojectheal.org. I know now you said you found the love of your life and you're raising, I believe, 2 daughters, correct? And so this journey of yours, you've learned so many different things. And what are sort of the key tenets when you think about raising your family? Like, well, what is it that, maybe you are doing differently than maybe the way you were raised? And it's obviously not in any indictment of our parents. Our parents, obviously, they loved us, they worked hard, and they made us work hard too. But, as you take all this new learning, how has that sort of shaped the way you're raising your family?
Yeah, let me first start by saying I still am who I am, meaning a product of all of my life's experiences. And so I'm going to tell you the things that I like how I think I'd like to be and how I'm trying to be, but I am still conditioned from my old Asian American, Indian American upbringing. So I'm battling with myself on a lot of these very things, right? So I am very flawed as well. But, one is really harnessing my girls' curiosity for what they're passionate about. I don't care if it's math or reading or whatever it is, if it's horseback riding, if it's dance. I want them to do something they love, and do less of what they don't love, including if that means homework or this and that. I just want them to focus on what they love. I think another thing is confidence. I think confidence is really important. Just being able to have the confidence to be able to be okay to fail, to be okay to pick something that might be different than what all your friends are picking, to just be your own person, which comes to independence. Another thing is being your own person, independence, is, I think, really important. Again, I struggle with it myself, individually in some of these things, and obviously I'm not the best parent, but I try to instill these things. But I'm also just a product of all my experiences, and so I battle my own Indian upbringing. Like, I want my kids to get fantastic grades because like that's just what I was conditioned to have to do. I was able to do whatever I did whatever I wanted to do and go have fun as long as I got my straight A's, right? Even though it could have come at a different cost. For my sister, it came at a different cost, right? She got her straight A's, but she was really struggling inside. But to my parents and myself, nobody saw it until it actually manifested in her losing weight because we didn't know what a mental illness was.
I really want us to sort of end both these ideas. And the first is this idea of the super passion. Let's go find that. Let's encourage our kids to find it. Let's encourage ourselves. Let's give ourselves the grace, the freedom, the ability to go find that super passion. There's a lot of different confidences, but I think the one, if we can actually master this one, then everything else feels a little easier, which is the confidence to fail, right? Yeah. Because if you're confident enough to fail and you fail, then, hey, that means you can be resilient against the worst case scenario. And so if we can develop that confidence to fail, that I think is an incredible skill.
And reward failure, because what does failure mean? Failure means you tried at something, right? You tried. And you as they say, you miss all the shots you don't take. So failure should be rewarded because you gave it a shot.
That's right. Then Michael Jordan missed the most shots ever, right? So not just made them, but missed the most, right? And then I think the last thing you said was really important, this idea that finding our independence, and part of our independence is what makes us imperfect. It's not always what makes us perfect, right? And especially by what society defines. This has been an incredible conversation. Now, as you think about people you know and other Asian Americans and the audience, who would you like us to invite as a potential guest to share their story so that our audience can actually benefit from their stories?
I think the people who are pursuing their passions, the people who broke through whatever the stereotypes for their respective culture might be, and who broke through and stood in the face of adversity. I didn't have many examples of those growing up, of people that looked like me to aspire to become. And the more we have examples within the Asian American community across a diverse, set of careers, it's very personal to me that I received so many non-responses or rejections, especially now that I actually deal with a lot of those agents that rejected me, and I remind them of that every time. I so acutely remember that feeling of nobody cares about you. And so it's very important to me. I try to not have any email go not responded to or any outreach of a student somewhere. Yeah, okay, they might want a job that I don't have to offer, but at least if I could help them learn about the industry, even if it's only for 5 minutes, actually, even if only just to let them know I hear them and I received receipt of their email or phone call or whatever it might be, because I know that could make a difference for them, because I know what it felt like when nobody responded to me. Finding more people that care about paying it forward and represent a diverse set of different careers and industries and walks of life, I think are nice examples for our young people of tomorrow.
No, you fully answered the question. I think it's the genesis and it's what's keeping us going to do this podcast is exactly what you're asking for and what we want. And the idea of people that broke through and finding their passions and that overcame adversity and stereotypes. This is exactly the people we want to showcase and have their stories be shared. And thank you for being a person that has actually broke through and not only just pursued your passion, but through lots of adversity and broken through stereotypes, both from an Asian community perspective, but also in the industry that you actually are successful in. Thank you so much for your time today, Paraag. I really appreciate the conversation.
It was great. Thank you for having me.
Listen to all episodes of Aconic on AconicPodcast.com. You can also catch new episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.